the man in the thrift store jacket didn't belong under the chandelier that dripped light like champagne. He knew it the way a sailor knows from the smell when a storm is wrong, too sweet, too still. The room was a cathedral of money. The carpet's hush swallowed footsteps, and the low music had been engineered decibel by decibel to signal to credit cards that this was a safe place to bleed. A black and gold sign at the revolving door read "The Brass Lantern" in serif type that implied venerable lineage, old recipes, old money. He had chosen it on purpose. He owned it. Reservation? The hostess let the single word hang, as if it were a velvet rope. "Table for one," he said, voiced sanded down, Midwestern flat. He had practiced that tone. It sounded like the kind of man who waited on hold and said, "No problem," even when the problem was all he had. She skimmed him top to bottom faded work coat, flannel, jeans with knees turned shiny by years of kneeling on something that wasn't a private jet. He had shaved imperfectly, so a gray shadow clung to his jaw like a rumor. The thick glasses were real enough to leave a mark on the bridge of his nose, but cheap enough to say discount pharmacy. He had even scuffed the toes of the boots with a rasp so they wouldn't betray the softness of leather that cost more than a month of someone else's rent. "We're fully committed," she said, smile lacquered, eyes unblinking. "Any weight is fine." Her finger began to tap the screen with the exaggerated patience of someone narrating magnanimity. "We can do a two-top by the service station. It's a little loud." "Sounds perfect." It didn't sound perfect. The two-top hugged the corridor where bussers slipped in and out, the air fragrant with bleach and burnt fat. A swinging door ticked open every few seconds with a brass porthole in it that showed a slice of kitchen, the flare of a grill, the panic of someone late plating dessert. He felt the hum of the walk-in refrigerator through the floorboards. He sat. He let the vibrations climb the chair legs into his spine until he could tell the compressors had been tuned to squeeze a few more months of life out of machinery that should have been replaced. He had spent 30 years learning to read the world through what it hid. Tonight would test what that knowledge cost him. "Water?" a voice said, and he looked up. She was not what the restaurant had scripted. Other servers wore the shine of performance. She had a carefulness like a violinist tuning in an empty hall. Her hair was spun up in a bun that said practicality more than style, and a baby hair had escaped and traced a neat comma by her temple. The name tag said Hannah in block letters. Her apron was bleached so clean it had thinned. A fray tracked the hem. He saw the shoes, the kind all servers wear, the non-slip rubber that saves knees and backs, but the soles were worn slick under the ball of the foot. Either the shoes were old, or she never stopped moving. He filed away that kind of detail, and it filed him back. "Sparkling or still?" she asked. Tap, he said. And a beer. Whatever's cheapest. Her face didn't move in the way that counts. I'll be right with you. He watched her go. The manager was a different species of animal square jaw, shirt a half-size tight to make the biceps do a second job. He drifted between tables, the way a hawk drifts over a field. The manager's eyes did not miss the thrift store jacket. He turned to the hostess, and the hostess lifted one shoulder in the universal shrug that means you seated him, you deal with him. In the mirrored wall beyond the manager, the undercover millionaire watched all three of them. Himself, the hawk, the lacquered smile assemble into a shape that people like to call service. He had learned that service meant 100 different things depending on where you stood. His name was Marcus Hale, 51. He was the son of a machinist and a public librarian, had learned interest rates on a kitchen table with a vinyl tablecloth and the sound of a radio game in the background. Hale Equity Partners had his name because partners had insisted. He had wanted something generic that pretended it had always existed, like an old river. Now HEP sat on 34 companies. Logistics, a chain of dental clinics, a software firm that made the kind of program that gets bought by cities and no one ever knows, and, through a hospitality umbrella, the Brass Lantern. The Lantern had 3 locations. Manhattan was the flagship, the one with the chandelier. Here we are, Hannah said, the glass sweat in her hand. She set it down. He saw the tremor in the water first, the ring of waves that kissed the rim and fell back. When she put the beer down, a label with cursive script that spelled out something aspirational, he saw the tremor in her fingers. It was there, and then it wasn't. A blink. She didn't smell like perfume. She smelled like soap and starch. Is your night going okay? He asked, like a man who asks because small talk is a currency he can afford. It's a Thursday, she said. And something in the way she said Thursday held both a prayer and a joke. He picked up the menu and treated it like an artifact. He had read its PDF version 100 times in a boardroom smelling of lemon pledge. It read differently under the chandelier. The founder's rib, 40 Oz, dry-aged 120 days, bone-in, winter truffle juice, $540. The margin on that plate funded the lighting designer's Tesla. He let the corner of the menu touch the tablecloth while he leaned back, scanning the wine list. The page offered a curated pour program, which was a dressed-up way of saying Coravin and audacity. What can I get started for you? Hannah asked, pen poised, forearm already tattooed with 2 table numbers in blue ballpoint. I'm hungry, he said, like it surprised him. The founder's rib, medium rare. Her pen paused for a fingernail's worth of time. If she knew the price, or didn't, she didn't let it shape her. It serves 2 to 3, she said, the script line management required. I'll take it on faith. And He let his eyes travel down the wine list. 1990 Smargo. If you're doing pours off the bottle. We can do a 3-ounce taste, she said. $2.40. Let's do 2. There it was, a figure that should have thundered. She didn't flinch. She didn't go ask a manager to pre-authorize. She wrote it down with the same pressure she had used to write tap. It struck him not the absence of judgment, but the absence of surprise. That could mean she had seen worse, or that she could imagine anything. Any allergies? She asked. Only to people who talk too much. He smiled, as if that were the sort of joke a man like him might be pleased with. I'll keep that in mind, she said, then turned toward the wine station. The manager intercepted her, like a defender reading a pass. Marcus couldn't hear all of it. Sound baffles, and music, and the door's steady tick of open-close. But he could read body language like Braille. The manager's jaw flexed. Smile stayed on, but sharpened into a weapon. Hannah did that thing servers do when a manager uses the tone, the posture shift that shrinks you without moving, just a degree of shoulder angle, a tilt of the chin. The manager gestured to Marcus's table, then to a terminal that glowed like a small, angry moon. Hannah nodded once, twice, the way someone nods to keep the ground from sliding. Marcus had seen men dress fear in 1,000 suits. He took a sip of the beer. It tasted like citrus and marketing. He leaned into the hum of the room and made himself small. He could swing a city's permitting board like a gate with a phone call. But he had come tonight not to swing, but to watch the hinges. Hannah returned with a crystal glass that caught the chandelier's light and broke it into slivers that danced on the tablecloth. She poured the wine with the slow discipline of someone who had learned muscle memory to drown noise. The perfume of it hit first, cedar, and something like old roses. He didn't lift it. He watched the red climb the glass like a tide and recede. She set the bottle upright on the tray, the Coravin needle still in its skin. He had paid for the device 6 times over and had sat through presentations on inert gas as if nitrogen alone could defend a brand. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "If it's not about the steak being market price." She let the joke be brittle, safe. "What would you order if you were me and paying didn't matter?" She blinked. It was not the question the script predicted. "I'd still order with my conscience," she said after a small beat. "The pork chop, if you want an answer. It's cheaper, but we brine it with fennel and orange peel, and you actually taste the farm. The rib is a performance." He almost laughed. "Tonight, I want performance," he said, "but I appreciate the honesty." Her eyes shifted toward the manager without a head turn. That glance whispered a paragraph. He decided not to spend it yet. Bussers flooded around him in a ballet disguised as panic, silver trays lifted and lowered, plates that arrived with steaks glistening like lacquered violins. Something about the sizzle was wrong. Not wrong, he had eaten enough to know, but a note off in the chord, a sweetness that might be butter gone too hot, or a grill not scraped. He saw the handle of a pan swing through the porthole, and he counted the seconds between door ticks, the cadence of a kitchen moving slightly faster than it wanted to. A gear forced that extra quarter turn. Marcus let the beer warm under his palm, then thought better of it, and drank. He wanted to be nobody so badly he could taste it, and to be nobody, he had to do the most difficult thing he knew. Nothing. His steak arrived with ceremony. The cart gleamed. A second server in a crisp black vest wheeled it forward, and a blade with a bone handle lay across a board like an altarpiece. The rib was beautiful, in the way decadence is a kind of violence, charred dark as rumor. Fat, lacquered, rosemary sprig aimed like a flag. The second server talked about age and origin, about marbling, about how the restaurant used a proprietary dry-aging locker with Himalayan salt bricks and controlled humidity to produce a flavor profile their clientele found irreplaceable. Marcus knew that locker existed. He also knew the actual work was done by a subcontracted facility in New Jersey that did an excellent job at 1/3 the cost and sent tasting notes he pretended to read. "Let me know if I can plate," the second server said. "Give me a minute," Marcus said, in the tone of a man postponed by awe. Hannah stepped in to swap out his cutlery. Her eyes flicked to his face as if to check a gauge. The tremor in her fingers returned for a breath and was gone. She set a ramekin of horseradish, the old-fashioned kind, with a texture like crushed ice, and a dish of truffle juice that glowed like varnish. The manager floated, watching, a smile shaped like a lawsuit. Marcus waited for him to disappear. Hannah's hand, on the way to lifting the empty beer bottle, faltered the smallest amount. Her fingers had a pen callus. He noticed it at the same time that he noticed she had palmed something flat and white in her other hand, the folded square of a linen cocktail napkin. The motion that followed was so clean, his brain almost missed it. As she reached for the bottle, her left hand touched the base of his water glass, slid beneath the stem less than an inch, and left the small square under the shadow, the glass through across the cloth. Her apron rustled. Her shoulders were a perfect, unremarkable line. The entire transfer took less time than it takes for a flame to decide whether a match is committed to the work of burning. He kept his face as a man's face should be when a steak is a small mountain, and the wine might be a pilgrimage. He didn't look down. He cut. The knife sank with the ease of a lie told too many times. He brought a slice to his lips. He did not put it in his mouth. "Everything good?" the manager asked at his shoulder, voice pitched for every table within 6 feet to hear. "Smells terrific," Marcus said. "My compliments to your vendor relationships." The manager's smile peeled back a micron. We take pride in our supply chain. Nice phrase, Marcus said. He waited until the manager drifted toward a banker's table that had already performed the neat ballet of dropping a black card on a banquette cushion to show everyone at once how the evening would go. Only then did he move the water glass. The napkin waited. It was folded into a precise square, edges aligned as if the act of making them meet had been a prayer. His fingers touched it, and he felt a thread of damp. He waited another heartbeat, because you don't spring a trap before you've decided who set it. He unfolded the napkin under the table's edge. The first line was written in block letters drilled into the paper. Anger can make even linen feel like paper. 4 words, all caps, no punctuation. Don't eat the steak. He felt his throat go tight in the way a doorframe tightens in winter. The next line was smaller, cramped to hide its speed. Lot WX 731. Recalled Monday. They relabeled. Check walk-in log. Cooler 2 has camera blind spot behind the seltzer crates. Do not say my name. His first thought was idiot, and he wasn't sure if he meant himself or them. He put the knife down with a gentleness that could be mistaken for reverence. The wine's scent, gorgeous a second ago, now throbbed like a fault line. He had 3 choices and 1 chance to choose right. He could eat and pretend, swallowing the note with the meat and carrying on for the sake of the test he had come to give. He could call the manager over and explode the table like a bomb. Let power be a club. Or he could do the most valuable thing he had learned in half a century. He could walk. He sipped water. It tasted like a decision. Hannah reappeared. She did not look at the napkin. She picked up the empty beer with the same choreography as before, eyes steady on the middle distance that keeps servers safe. The pen at her ear caught a glint of chandelier light. He thought absurdly of a lighthouse. I'm so sorry, he said softly. I have to step outside to take a call. Would you mind keeping the plate warm? Of course, she said, and her voice did not crack on the smallest seam of relief. He stood. The manager saw him. The manager's body shifted into shape, authority squared, practiced charm. Marcus nodded like a man who hadn't been noticed since high school. He put a $100 bill under the water glass, not as a tip, but as a message about how invisible he intended to remain. He let his hand brush the napkin and palm it. It felt hot. Outside, January slapped his face. The revolving door sighed him into Manhattan's winter like a huge mouth that had decided to spit him out. The street was one of those New York blocks that think of themselves as representing all of New York brownstone shoulders. A florist where a vase in the window cost as much as a used car payment. Yellow cabs threading the curb, as if curbs were only a suggestion. A delivery truck idled, the exhaust leaving the air blue-white. He stepped into the lee of a column, at the edge of the awning, where the wind had learned manners. He unfolded the napkin again. Don't eat the steak. and read the rest 3 more times, because repetition changes meaning. The handwriting told him more than the words. The block letters shouted a warning. The small script whispered a procedure. Lot numbers, a recall date. He knew enough about meat to know recalls happen, that a lot number can become a grenade, that relabeling is not a mistake, but a crime. He also knew enough about cameras to understand that blind spot behind the seltzer crates meant either someone had studied the angles or had been taught to. The city's noise turned down around him, as if someone's fingers pinched the volume. He pulled a phone from his inside pocket, not the one that carried his identity like a current, but the ugly, dumb rectangle bought with cash. He didn't dial yet. He held the napkin and let a picture unspool in his mind. It was not a movie. It was a plan list tightening into a cable that could pull something out of the dark. A couple in evening clothes stepped past him, the woman laughing in the thin way people laugh when they're on the wrong side of cold and don't want to admit it. A courier skated around a taxi's hood, shoulder bag banging his hip like a drum. Marcus felt time hiccup. He was 51, and his father had told him once that men don't get slower when they get older. They get careful. Careful can be a kind of speed. The burner woke in his hand like a small animal. He tapped one number. The call didn't ring so much as it connected, because some bonds render distance silly. "Yeah," a voice said, smoke and steel, a woman whose throat had made friends with the Atlantic air. "Pike," he said. "Boss? You're on the toy. You in trouble or just undercover for sport again?" "Bit of both," he said. He looked back through the glass. The chandelier threw diamonds up the mirror. He saw the back of Hannah's head for an instant, the bun precise as a promise. "I'm at the Lantern. I want you to pull FDA recall notices in the last 10 days. Keyword beef, subprimal rib, lots that begin with W, X." He could hear the smile in the voice flatten. "Copy. You want me to notify health?" "Not yet. And Pike, when you're done, I need a favor." "Which kind?" "The kind where you don't use a badge and you don't leave fingerprints." "Because Thursday," she said dryly. "Because Thursday," he said, and he felt the relief of someone who has admitted to the weather. He hung up. He read the napkin again, and only then did he see the last line, so faint the ink had begun to fail. It had been written with the pen's last breath squeezed from the barrel. "He's not the one in charge." It was underlined twice, violently. The crossbar of the H had dug into the fabric. The fiber had lifted under the pressure. He imagined a hand pressing too hard to make up for the way a voice wasn't allowed to rise. He imagined the warm panic of a back hallway and a clock ticking, ticking. He put the napkin flat against the cold glass of the window, where his breath fogged it a little. He had come tonight to test a system he built, to see whether it could be kind without being watched. Instead, he had found a system that, left alone, became itself. He slid the napkin into the inside pocket of the coat that didn't belong to him. It burned there. He stepped back into the heat and perfume of the dining room with the practiced stoop of a man apologizing for a call that had hurt no one but had cost him dignity. The manager pivoted toward him, ready to be benevolent. Marcus didn't slow. He brushed past the smile, past a table where a banker told a joke in which a woman was a line item, past a couple celebrating something and making too much of a show of pretending not to. At the two-top by the service station, the steak still gleamed like a sin you could justify. Hannah appeared, a plate warmer in her hand, like a shield. She looked at his face, not as if she recognized him, but as if she recognized whatever it is that lives under recognition. "Everything okay?" she asked. He nodded, then added a layer of theater so thick it felt like walking with weights. "It was a wrong number," he said, and then quieter, for only her. "Thank you." Her smile was small, a private thing edged with fear. "For the wine?" she said out loud, professional, because the room had ears. "For the recommendation," he said. And she understood that an entire strategy had been laundered through a word that meant nothing. He picked up the knife. The chandelier trembled a fraction as the HVAC kicked, and the shadow of it swam across the wall like a jellyfish. He set the knife down. He folded his napkin slowly, carefully, the way you fold a flag when you have decided what you're going to do for the rest of the night. The steak sat untouched, bleeding onto porcelain like a secret he refused to taste. Marcus leaned back, adjusting the glasses that pinched his nose, the disguise he wore now feeling heavier than the gold watch hidden at home in a safe. From the corner of his eye, he saw Hannah pivot away, her tray balanced like a shield, her shoulders squared in that fragile way soldiers square before they march back into a battlefield they never chose. He wanted to call her back, to whisper a dozen questions. "How do you know? Who told you? What exactly is happening in my kitchen?" But power doesn't ask in public, not when the wrong ears are listening. And the room was full of ears, all calibrated to wealth, gossip, opportunity. So Marcus chewed nothing, drank nothing, and let his expression be the mask of a man faintly dissatisfied with the temperature of his food. Across the room, the manager, he had caught the name earlier, printed on a placard clipped too proudly to his chest. Travis Calder hovered near the bar. Travis's smile could have sold counterfeit stock on Wall Street. His teeth glimmered, but his eyes darted, sharp, hawkish, like he was keeping track of every pore, every garnish, every possible slip that might leak $1 from the lantern's nightly ledger. Marcus recognized the species. Men like Travis believed rules existed to be bent so long as no one of consequence noticed. He was about to notice. Marcus reached for the steak knife again, but not for the rib. He turned it gently in his palm, feeling the weight, letting the blade catch the chandelier's fractured light. His mind wasn't on eating. It was cataloging, arranging, building scaffolding around the 4 words that had stopped him cold. Don't eat the steak. Whoever Hannah was, she had just turned his quiet experiment into a war. In the kitchen, Hannah wiped her hands on her apron. So often the fabric had turned gray, where white should have been. Her pulse hammered against her ribs, like it wanted out. She shouldn't have done it. Every rule she had learned in 3 years of service screamed that you don't get involved, you don't notice, you don't risk. Yet she had. She pictured her brother, Caleb, coughing in the hospital bed 2 subway lines away, IV tubing snaking into his arm, the bills stacked on her counter like an avalanche she could never outrun. Finch's threats. One mistake, and you'll never work again. Not in this city, not in any city, echoed like scripture. She had traded silence for survival. Until tonight. Because something in the thrift store man's eyes had split her armor. He didn't look like the others. He didn't sneer at the noise from the service door. He didn't glance at her shoes with pity or disgust. He saw. And then, dangerously, he kept seeing. Maybe that was why she wrote it. Maybe that was why her hand had trembled as she pressed ink into linen, telling him not to eat what she herself had served. The chef barked orders in staccato French. Pans clanged. The hiss of fat on iron filled the air. Hannah steadied a tray of drinks, and through the heat shimmer, she caught Travis's eyes, cutting toward her. He'd noticed. He always noticed. She turned before the panic could bloom across her face. Marcus left cash for the meal untouched, a decoy for eyes that measured worth by tender, not by the weight of a secret. He slipped away to the restrooms, past the gilt-framed mirrors that reflected back a nobody in threadbare flannel. The restroom smelled of cedar polish and wealth's attempt to disguise itself. He locked himself in a stall, pulled out the burner phone, and snapped 2 quick photos of the napkin note. The flash was muted by his hand, but his heart still hammered like he'd set off a flare. He encrypted the images into a secure cloud drop he paid a hacker in Denver to maintain. Insurance. He texted 1 word to Pike. Confirm. Then he waited, the silence of the stall stretching. A man washed his hands outside, the faucet's hiss loud as accusation, then left. Marcus counted his breaths. His phone buzzed. FDA bulletin 2 days ago. Lot WX731. 4,000 pounds beef rib. E. coli positive. Nationwide recall. Disposal required within 72 hours. Report says ongoing trace into supply relabeling. You're sitting on it, boss. What's your play? He exhaled once, sharp, silent. So Hannah hadn't been bluffing. The brass lantern, his lantern, was serving condemned meat at $500 a plate. His brand, the empire he had built on the illusion of immaculate luxury, was rotting from within. He felt a wave of disgust, not at the pathogen, but at the betrayal. Someone inside was pocketing blood money by feeding poison to the city's elite. And if the chain was compromised here, it could be compromised everywhere. He typed, "Hold, quiet. Trace deeper. Find Calder." The reply was instant. Already on it. Guy's dirty. More soon. Back on the floor, Hannah returned to Marcus's table with water she knew he wouldn't drink. He looked up, just a glance, but in it she read the impossible. Gratitude, warning, alliance. It was absurd. She was a waitress clinging to a paycheck. He was a stranger who might not even tip. Yet in that look, she felt less alone than she had in months. "Everything all right?" she asked, voice flat, rehearsed. But her pulse was a storm. He nodded, then leaned forward an inch. "Don't clear the plate yet," he said softly. "I'm not done." The words were nothing, but she heard what he hadn't said. "I heard you. I believe you." Her throat tightened. She turned away before Travis could see the flicker in her expression. Travis Calder leaned on the bar rail, swirling bourbon in a glass he had no intention of paying for. His eyes tracked Hannah like crosshairs. He had noticed her nerves, the tremor, the way she hovered too long at table 17, the thrift store nobody, with the gall to order a founder's rib. Calder knew types like that. Grifters, frauds, bloggers trying to bait content. He should have shut it down. Yet curiosity kept him circling. If Hannah was involved, if she slipped up, he would own her completely. More than he already did. "Everything smooth?" the bartender asked. "Smooth as the whiskey," Travis said, flashing teeth. But inside, suspicion simmered. Tonight, something was off. Marcus let the minutes stretch, every sense alive. He didn't taste the steak, but he let the smell coil into his lungs. He listened to the cadence of shoes on hardwood, the rhythm of cutlery, the false laughter of people buying an evening's illusion. Underneath it all was Hannah's zote, burning against his chest like a brand. He would not eat the steak. He would find the rot. And when he did, he would burn it out root and branch. But first, he needed more than a napkin and a hunch. He needed proof. And to get proof, he would have to go deeper into his own empire than he had ever dared. Outside, sirens wailed faintly, swallowed by the hum of the city. Inside, the chandelier glimmered, oblivious. Marcus Hale sat invisible under its light, a millionaire disguised as nobody, and began to plan the night that would change everything. The napkin weighed nothing in his pocket, yet Marcus felt its presence like a stone dragging at the seams of his jacket. He hadn't eaten a bite, but his pulse thudded as if he'd downed a gallon of caffeine. He pushed back from the table, murmured a thanks to Hannah, and stepped once more into the brass and marble hallway that led to the side exit. The air shifted instantly, colder, emptier, alive with the muffled thunder of the kitchen behind swinging doors. He pressed the burner phone to his ear, one hand shielding the device as if it were a forbidden flame. "Talk to me," he whispered. Pike's voice came filtered, calm, but edged. "Your guy, Travis Calder, former assistant manager at a steakhouse in Dallas, fired twice, inventory discrepancies, sexual harassment complaint, no convictions, showed up in New York 3 years ago with a resume polished smoother than marble, tied now to 2 shell companies, Graymont Suppliers and F+G Logistics, both routing invoices straight through brass lantern accounts." Marcus stopped walking. The chandelier's glow from the main dining room spilled in fractured beams, gold slicing across his worn boots. "Invoices," he said. "For what?" "Meat," Pike answered flatly. "Guess which lot numbers keep surfacing. WX731. Recalled beef. He's laundering it through those shells, flipping poison into profit. Boss, he's not a petty thief. He's a pipeline." Marcus shut his eyes, anger threading up his spine. So it was true. His lantern, his empire, wasn't just negligent. It was complicit. Someone had to sign, someone had to receive, someone had to pocket. And Calder is the fulcrum. "Stay on him," Marcus said. "Discreet. I want every transaction traced, every account bled dry." "You planning to loop in legal yet?" Pike asked. "Not until I've held the ledger in my hand," Marcus said. His voice was steel now. Back on the floor, Hannah balanced a tray of empty glasses, her fingers numb against the condensation. She'd slipped him the napkin, and he hadn't exploded, hadn't betrayed her. Relief mingled with dread, because if Calder had seen, she was finished. She dropped the glasses behind the bar and turned only to find him waiting, his grin tight, his eyes cruel. "Rosie," Calder said softly. He always used the wrong name for her, stripping her identity into something smaller. "A word." She froze. "Yes, sir." "Office. Now." Her pulse clanged against her eardrums. She followed, past gleaming tables and whispered conversations, down a hall lined with black and white photos meant to suggest heritage. The office door clicked shut behind her. Calder leaned against the desk, his bourbon breath fogging the space. "You've been nervous all night," he said. "Why?" "I just tired," she stammered. "Funny," he drawled, "because nervous waitresses make mistakes. And mistakes cost me money. You still owe me from last month, don't you? $5,000, wasn't it? Be a shame if a certain ledger fell into the wrong hands with your handwriting all over it." Her stomach twisted. He knew exactly which fear to press her brother's bills, her own forced signatures. "I didn't. Spare me." He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a venomous whisper. "You want to keep your job? You want your brother's insurance not to suddenly evaporate? Then you keep your pretty head down, smile at the guests, and if I see you hovering too long at a loser's table again, I'll make sure you're blacklisted from here to Jersey. She bit her lip, tasting iron. Yes, Mr. Calder. He smiled, satisfied, and waved her off like a servant. Back to work. Marcus watched from a distance. He hadn't heard the words, but he saw enough. Calder's posture, Hannah's shrinking frame, the ugly triumph in his grin. Rage sharpened Marcus's focus. He thought of his father, who once told him, "The real test of wealth isn't what you can buy, it's what you can protect." Tonight, he intended to protect. He slipped into the alley outside, Pike already waiting in a rented sedan with tinted windows. She handed him a thin laptop, glowing against the dark. "Ledger exists," she said. "Physical. Calder keeps it in a wall safe. Combination unknown. Office has secondary keypad lock. Camera with wireless feed. I can loop it, but only for 5 minutes." Marcus adjusted his glasses, his disguise suddenly feeling laughable. "Then 5 minutes is all I'll need." "Boss, this is burglary." "This is preservation," he replied. "If Calder's poisoning my chain, I need evidence that burns." Pike studied him. "You're really going in?" "I built this empire," Marcus said, jaw set. "If it's rotting, I'm not sending a lawyer to sniff the air. I'm cutting out the rot myself." Inside, Hannah steadied her breathing, watching Marcus from across the dining room. He had returned, sitting like a ghost at table 17, untouched steak cooling before him. She couldn't fathom why he hadn't walked away, unless he was someone more than he appeared. She remembered his steady eyes, the way he hadn't doubted her note for a second. Hope flickered dangerously in her chest. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't fighting alone. But she also knew hope was the most expensive dish on the menu, and she could not afford it. Marcus lifted his glass, pretending to sip, eyes fixed on the kitchen doors. The battle lines were drawn. Calder had his office. Hannah had her fear. Marcus had his note, his burner, and a 5-minute window that could change everything. And when the chandelier lights dimmed slightly at 11:30, signaling the last seating of the night, Marcus knew. The real game was about to begin. The brass lantern always looked different after hours. By midnight, the chandelier dimmed to half light, the tables stripped of their curated theater, and the perfume of power was replaced by the raw smells beneath: grease, bleach, and fatigue. Staff trickled out, with coats bundled, muttering about subway delays and side hustles, unaware that a storm was gathering inside their own workplace. Marcus Hale stood in a service alley, the thrift store jacket traded for a janitor's jumpsuit 2 sizes too big. The embroidered patch read, "Spark Clean Solutions." The disguise smelled faintly of ammonia and despair. Pike handed him a mop handle and grinned. "Congratulations, boss. You've been promoted from billionaire to busboy." Marcus smirked, tension sharp in his chest. "I'll try not to screw up orientation." The back door clicked open with a sigh. Pike had looped the lock feed with a device no larger than a garage remote. 5 minutes to reset. Once we're in, you keep your head down and follow my lead. Inside, the service corridor glowed with fluorescence that made every surface look jaundiced. The air carried the tang of lemon disinfectant over stale fryer oil. Marcus pushed the mop bucket forward, its wheels squealing faintly, the sound oddly loud against the hush. He felt invisible, yet dangerously conspicuous. They moved past stacked crates, a tangle of aprons, a bulletin board with schedules pinned under smiley face magnets. Pike led him to the manager's office. The door was oak, polished, its brass plate gleaming. A keypad blinked red beside the handle, and above the doorframe, a small dome camera watched like a glass eye. "Smile," Pike muttered. She lifted a phone-sized device, tapped twice, and the camera's indicator went dark. Looping feed. You've got 4 minutes, 20 seconds. The keypad lock surrendered to her nimble fingers, wires coaxed into submission. With a soft beep, the latch released. The office smelled of bourbon and arrogance. Walls lined with framed photos, Calder shaking hands with city council members, Calder at charity galas, Calder on a golf course with men who looked like they had never walked a block without a driver. Behind the desk sat a credenza of thick binders labeled with fiscal quarters, all for show. "Safe?" Marcus asked. Pike scanned, then knelt behind the bookshelf. "There." She pulled aside a row of untouched management manuals. Leadership, the Calder Way, Customer Service Excellence, and revealed a steel door flush with the wall. A rotary dial. Old school. Marcus crouched beside her, heart thudding. "Can you crack it?" "Could." She tilted her head. "But faster, if we guess what an egomaniac uses as a code." Marcus studied the office. The photos, the trophies. His eyes snagged on a plaque from a local softball league. Calder. Grinning. Jersey number 14. Trophy engraved, City Champs, 2018. "Try 1-4-18, Marcus murmured. Pike spun the dial, numbers clattering under her touch. A click. The safe swung open. Inside, cash bundles, a passport, and a thick black ledger bound in leather, edges worn from constant handling. Marcus's hand trembled as he lifted it. He opened to the first page, and bile rose in his throat. Invoices scrawled in neat columns, but the supplier names glared like poison. Westland Meats, LLC. He knew that name. A plant in Jersey shuttered months ago by the USDA for contamination. Yet here were shipments logged weekly, funneled through Calder's shell firms, relabeled as premium. The margins obscene. The dates current. Pike snapped photos with a pen camera, page after page. "He's been serving condemned beef for 6 months, she muttered. "Charging 300% markup. Your customers eat poison, and Calder bankrolls himself through a ghost company." Marcus's jaw clenched. Not just customers. Hannah, the staff, anyone who eats family meal back here. They're the first ones poisoned. He flipped further. His eyes froze on a line item. Lantern East, delivery lot WX731, 4,000 Hans Lalbys. Tonight's stake, the one Hannah warned him about. He slammed the ledger shut. His empire wasn't just corrupted, it was weaponized. Time, Pike hissed. We've got 30 seconds before the loop resets. She replaced the ledger, spun the dial shut, re-slotted the books. Marcus pushed the mop bucket into the hall, just as the camera's red light blinked alive. They walked, shoulders bent, in the posture of people too invisible to notice. At the service door, Marcus's pulse still raged. The night air hit him like absolution. He sucked in oxygen, sharp, with diesel exhaust. Pike exhaled a curse. You've got enough evidence to bury him. What's next? Marcus looked up at the high windows of the brass lantern, warm light spilling like lies into the January dark. Next, he said, we make sure Hannah survives long enough to testify. Inside, Hannah scrubbed down a table with shaking hands, unaware that her note had already set fire to an empire. Calder leaned at the bar, eyes fixed on her, suspicion thick as smoke. She felt his gaze and knew. Before the night was over, he would tighten his grip. But she also knew something else, though she dared not believe it. The man in the thrift store jacket wasn't just another customer. He was watching, planning, moving. And for the first time in months, she felt a flicker of something stronger than fear. She felt the beginning of hope. The leather ledger's images still glowed on Pike's hidden drive when Marcus ducked into a narrow bar 3 blocks from the lantern. The kind of place with flickering neon and a jukebox that hadn't been touched since Sinatra was alive. He slid into the last booth, the cracked vinyl sighing under his weight. For the first time all night, he pulled out his real phone. One contact. Arthur Pendleton, COO. The only man alive who knew about Marcus's undercover rituals. The line rang once. Arthur, Marcus said low, we have a problem. A pause, then Arthur's crisp British baritone. Tell me you're not in another one of your field experiments. This isn't an experiment. It's a crisis. Calder's been buying condemned beef, laundering it through shell firms, poisoning the lantern supply chain. I've got the ledger in hand, photographed, every page. Arthur exhaled, the sound like a long door creaking. Good Lord. If this gets out, lawsuits, FDA sanctions, criminal indictments, your name will be scorched earth. My name is already on the building, Marcus snapped. Better to scorch it myself than let someone else turn it to ash. Arthur was silent for a beat. All right. What's your move? I want the FBI and FDA looped in, quietly. Coordinated strike. But not yet. Calder suspects nothing. I need him to hang himself a little further. And there's a waitress, Hannah. She risked everything to warn me. He's crushing her under a fabricated debt. He's using her as his fall girl. Then we protect her, Arthur said firmly. Marcus's throat tightened. For years, he had forgotten what it meant to protect anyone. Now, because of one note on a napkin, he felt it burning in his bones again. Meanwhile, back at the lantern, Hannah stacked menus with trembling hands. Closing shift was always the worst. Fewer guests, more chances for Calder to corner her. Tonight, his stare was a vice. He beckoned with one finger, a serpent summoning prey. Vance, he said. He'd never once used her first name. She followed into the office, heart stuttering. The bourbon stench hit her before the door shut. You think I don't see you? Calder's voice was a hiss. Hovering at table 17, whispering with that nobody in the thrift jacket? You think I don't know a setup when I see one? Her mouth went dry. He was just ordering. Ordering? Calder slammed a palm on the desk, rattling the glass of half-melted ice. He ordered a $500 rib like it was a cheeseburger. You think I believe that? You've been feeding him something. Information. She shook her head, words breaking. No, sir, I swear. He grabbed her wrist, fingers like a clamp. Listen carefully. You breathe one word about this place, and your brother's little treatments vanish. Gone. He dies. And it's on you. Tears blurred her eyes, but fury burned beneath. He thought threats were chains. But chains can also be weapons, if you know how to swing them. Yes, Mr. Calder, she whispered. Marcus's phone buzzed. Pike again. Boss, I shadowed Calder after you left. He's paranoid. Called someone on a burner. Said, the next shipment's tomorrow night. Same dock, same crate numbers. Guess what? It's another recalled lot. If we intercept, we can bury him in federal charges. Marcus's pulse jumped. Where? Brooklyn waterfront. Midnight tomorrow. Good. We'll be there. He ended the call, his jaw tight. Arthur's voice returned through the speaker. Marcus, you're playing dangerous. You could let authorities handle this. Marcus looked down at the napkin note, still folded in his palm. Don't eat the steak. 4 words from a waitress had dragged him into the underbelly of his own empire. No, he said. Authorities come after. First, I make sure Calder knows exactly who burned him. Back at the lantern, Hannah stepped out of the office, her wrist throbbing where Calder's fingers had dug. She forced her face neutral, wiped her eyes, carried an empty tray as if nothing had happened. But inside, she felt herself collapsing, one nerve at a time. Then, across the room, she saw him, table 17 empty now, but the man with the thrift store jacket watching from the doorway, as if he'd never really left. His eyes caught hers for the briefest second. No pity, no dismissal, just recognition. And in that silent moment, Hannah felt something she hadn't in months. The fragile, terrifying spark of belief. Maybe she wasn't trapped forever. Maybe someone was listening. The Brooklyn waterfront at midnight was a place that smelled of rust, diesel, and ghosts. Cargo containers stacked like tombstones under yellow floodlights. Fog curling in low sheets across the black water. Pike parked the unmarked van 2 blocks away, the windows taped to kill glare. Marcus tugged at the janitor's jumpsuit he still wore, now hidden under a dark overcoat. His disguise had evolved from comedy to camouflage. "This is your last chance to back out," Pike muttered, loading a small drone the size of a shoebox. Its red eye blinked like a heartbeat. Marcus shook his head. "I didn't crawl through grease-soaked corridors to let some federal agent fumble the catch. I want Calder nailed to the dock with his own invoices." "You know you sound like a man who misses the thrill of the hunt," Pike said, releasing the drone. It rose silently, vanishing into the fog. "Maybe I do," Marcus admitted, eyes hard. "But this isn't about me. It's about Hannah." At that same hour, Hannah sat on the thin mattress of her walk-up apartment, one hand wrapped around a mug gone cold. Her brother Caleb wheezed softly in the next room, the oxygen concentrator humming like an old fridge. Bills scattered the table, hospital statements, overdue notices, red stamps that screamed, "Final warning." Calder's grip still ached on her wrist. His threats replayed on loop. She had promised herself she would never risk Caleb's treatment. Yet her napkin note had already crossed the line. The thrift store man had looked at her like she mattered, like truth mattered. She opened her phone, thumb hovering over the text draft she'd been writing all evening. "I can get you into his office. I know where the second set of books is hidden." Her thumb trembled. Sending it meant no going back. Not sending it meant Calder owned her forever. Caleb coughed, a hacking sound that rattled the walls. Hannah closed her eyes, whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom," and pressed send. On the docks, Pike's voice came through Marcus's earpiece. 2 trucks, unmarked white, 4 men offloading crates. Check the stencil. Marcus crouched behind a stack of pallets, the fog wrapping him like a cloak. 1 crate rolled off the truck. The stenciled letters glared under the floodlight. 732. Another recalled lot. Another 4,000 pounds of poison. "They're moving it straight into refrigerated storage," Pike said. "By morning, that meat will be on plates across Manhattan." Marcus's jaw set. "Not if we burn Calder tonight." A phone buzzed in his pocket. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered with a whisper. "Hello?" "It's me." The voice was raw, trembling. "Hannah." Marcus froze. "How did you get this number?" "You left a receipt. I saw the digits scribbled in the corner." Her breath shook. "I don't care who you are. I just know Calder's killing people, and I can't carry it anymore. There's a second ledger reel invoices, hidden behind a false drawer in his desk. If you want proof, that's where it is." Marcus's chest tightened. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because he said my brother's life depends on my silence. But silence is already killing him." Her voice cracked. "Please, don't let Calder win." Before he could answer, the line went dead. Pike's voice cut in. "Boss, you okay? You look like you just saw a ghost." "I did," Marcus muttered. He looked at the crates, at the men moving them under the fog, at the ledger burning a hole in Calder's office drawer. "We hit both," Marcus said suddenly. "The dock tonight, the office tomorrow. No more shadows." Pike whistled low. "You're going to war." Marcus's gaze hardened. "No." Calder declared war the moment he threatened her brother. Meanwhile, Hannah sat in the dark apartment, phone clutched in her hand, pulse hammering. She had burned the bridge. Calder would know. If Marcus was a fraud, she was ruined. But if he was who she prayed he was, then maybe, just maybe, she had finally found an ally powerful enough to end the nightmare. In the silence, Caleb's cough rattled again. Hannah pressed the phone to her chest and whispered to the shadows, "Please, let this be the right choice." On the Brooklyn docks, Marcus watched a forklift rumble forward, lifting a crate marked Prime Organic Meats, the name Hannah had whispered in her note. He knew now. There was nothing prime about it. It was death in plastic wrap. The night had turned colder, sharper, and Marcus Hale, billionaire in a thrift store jacket, realized he wasn't just chasing evidence anymore. He was chasing redemption. The fog on the Brooklyn docks thickened until it felt like smoke. Pike's drone hovered high above, its lens capturing everything. Workers peeling recall stickers from crates, slapping on new labels that screamed Prime Organic Meats in cheerful green. The men worked quickly, their gloves slick, their faces blank. One supervisor checked the manifest and stuffed a thick envelope into his jacket. "Got them," Pike whispered. "Chain of custody, time-stamped. This footage alone could bury Calder." Marcus's jaw clenched. "Not enough. I want him standing in the ashes of his own lies." At the lantern, Hannah's shift dragged past closing. Calder prowled the empty dining room, a glass of bourbon in his hand. "Rosie," he called softly. She froze. He leaned against a table, smile sharp as glass. "Funny thing, our inventory check tomorrow? I think we'll find some discrepancies. Your name all over them." Her throat closed. "I didn't." "Doesn't matter what you did. Matters what I can prove. And when your brother's insurance hears you falsified invoices, poof. His treatments vanish. You want that?" Tears blurred her vision. Calder stepped closer. "So you'll do as you're told. Or I make one call, and you lose everything." Across the river, Marcus's burner buzzed. Arthur's voice crackled through. "Feds are in position. FDA, FBI, state inspectors. They move when you say the word." Marcus stared at the dock, where one last crate was hoisted into cold storage. Then he thought of Hannah, her trembling hand, her brother's cough, the courage it took to scribble 4 words on linen. "Move," Marcus said. Sirens split the night. Black SUVs screeched into the dockyard, floodlights igniting the fog into white fire. Agents swarmed, shouting orders, badges flashing. Workers dropped tools and froze. The supervisor bolted, only to be tackled against a container wall. Crates burst open under inspection, beef wrapped in plastic, tags showing recall codes. The lies laid bare. Pike lowered the drone with a satisfied grin. Your empire just turned honest again. But Marcus wasn't done. Arthur, he barked into the phone. Stage 2. I want Calder in cuffs before lunch service tomorrow. Morning at the lantern glowed falsely warm. The chandelier lit for another day of illusions. Staff buzzed nervously. Whispers of trucks stopped. News bulletins about contaminated beef already hitting the airwaves. Calder barked orders louder than usual, face flushed. Then the doors opened. Arthur Pendleton entered first, suit immaculate, 2 federal agents flanking him. Behind them, Marcus walked in, not in a thrift store jacket, not in janitor gray, but in a charcoal suit that seemed to command gravity itself. His glasses were gone. His stride was steel. The room froze. Calder's smirk drained away as recognition dawned. You, he breathed. Yes, Marcus said calmly. Marcus Hale, owner. And you, Mr. Calder, are finished. He gestured. An agent laid the ledger on the table, photos clipped, invoices highlighted. We have your shell companies, your dockyard shipments, your falsified invoices. We even have you on video threatening one of your own employees. Rosie stood at the edge of the room, menus clutched in white-knuckled hands. Marcus turned to her. His voice softened. You were the only one brave enough to speak. Last night, you saved more lives than you know. Her eyes filled, disbelief crashing into relief. I don't understand. You will, Marcus promised. He looked back at Calder. Agents, do your job. Handcuffs clicked. Calder sputtered, but the sound died under the weight of inevitability. He was led out past the staff, his empire of lies collapsing behind him. Silence filled the lantern. Then Marcus spoke, his voice carrying. This place will change. Not tomorrow. Today. The debt Calder fabricated against Miss Vance is erased. Effective immediately, Blackwood Holdings is creating a medical trust, her brother's treatments, covered for life. And she, he paused, meeting her stunned gaze, will lead our new division of ethical oversight, reporting directly to me. Gasps rippled through the staff. Rosie's knees nearly buckled. I'm just a waitress. No, Marcus said firmly. You're proof that integrity still matters, and I trust no one else more to guard it. Her tears spilled, but this time they were relief, not despair. Later, outside the lantern, Rosie stood with Caleb leaning on her arm, hospital wristband still on his wrist. Marcus approached quietly. Thank you, she whispered. He shook his head. No, Rosie. Thank you. You reminded me what wealth is for. She smiled faintly. And what's that? He looked at the morning sun breaking over the city skyline, the glass towers catching fire in gold. Not the stake, he said softly. Not the empire. It's the lives you lift when you finally use it right. Epilogue. News broke within hours. Luxury steakhouse chain tied to recall. Fraud. FBI investigation ongoing. Calder's name trended. His mugshot splashed across every outlet. But another headline rose beside it. Waitress's courage saves thousands from contaminated meat. And in a modest apartment across town, Caleb took his medication with tears in his eyes, the cost no longer a noose around his sister's neck. The napkin lay folded in Marcus's desk drawer, framed in glass. 4 words that had changed everything. Don't eat the steak.